This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Tony Rinaudo, Principal Climate Action Advisor at World Vision. He's the pioneer behind Farmer-Managed Natural Regeneration, a simple technique that's helped reforest over 6 million hectares of land and transform millions of lives across the world. We're exploring how communities can restore degraded land using resources literally at their feet, and what this means for fighting climate change and poverty. You'll hear about Tony's incredible journey from missionary to award-winning environmentalists, how a simple technique is creating hope in the world's driest places, and what role local communities play in solving our climate crisis. Let's get into it. Well, it's great to have you on the podcast, Tony.
Thank you, Paul. Wonderful to be here.
So good to be able to chat with you. And, you know, you've had an incredible journey over your career. And so talk to us a little bit about what drove you to dedicate your life to helping communities restore their land. How did it all kind of start?
Sure. I can actually trace it right back to childhood. And I grew up in a beautiful part of Victoria, northeast Victoria. The hills, the trees, the mountain streams, that was my playground. So a wonderful childhood with a lot of freedom. But there were three major things that shaped the role that I'm in and the person that I am. And that was the destruction of that bushland that I love so much. There was a lot of bulldozing and leaving of steep hills barren for months, years on end. And even as a child, just didn't add up. And I was quite angry at the short-term thinking of getting gain with such destruction alongside it.
Yeah.
Secondly, I was very curious about the world, and I used to read, I used to watch the news, and I became very aware that while I had everything, I never went hungry. There are other children much less fortunate than myself, and that really ate away at me, the injustice of that. So in many ways, as a boy, I was quite angry, but very frustrated. I didn't know how to change the things of the adult world. But fortunately, my mum's faith had a big impact on me, big influence. And it gave me a framework for life that set me on this track. So I didn't know how to change adults, but I had this secret power. And I said a little boy's prayer, please use me somehow, somewhere to make a difference. And for me, that kick-started this journey that I'm on. And I've tried to be faithful to that prayer ever since.
That's amazing. That work has found you at World Vision, and you've been there at World Vision since 1999,
Yes.
which is quite a while. How has your role changed over that time? Where did you start, and where are you working now?
So in 99, I joined the Africa team as a program officer, and you had to be a jack of all trades. It was actually very good for me to get to know the organization and how things work, but extremely frustrating because I had this vision and this passion to see this method of restoration, farmer-managed natural regeneration, spread across the world. So that was my initial role as a program officer doing all sorts of jobs. That morphed into around 2010 or 11, I became a technical advisor. And my main role was helping to put together projects for food security and land restoration. And it was during that period that I also had the freedom to start visiting countries and running workshops teaching these methods at the farmer and community level. I continued in that role till about 2017 or so. And today, as Principal Climate Action Advisor, I'm more the spokesperson of this, what's become a global movement for land restoration using farmer-managed natural regeneration. So I speak to government policy people, other non-government organizations, media, and so on, talking about the benefits and the impacts of this approach.
Amazing. And so you mentioned farmer-managed natural regeneration, sometimes called FMNR. Everyone likes a good acronym in this part of this work. So, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, can you explain what FMNR is?
So, vast areas of the earth were once forested, and much of this land has been cleared very, very often. And even in some, not all, but in some so called desert areas, we have what I call an underground forest. And it exists in the form sometimes of living tree stumps with the ability to sprout, sometimes even remnant bits of root with that same capacity. And very, very often there are hardy but dormant tree seeds in the soils of these past forested lands. And so the method FMNR simply involves finding and selecting those what look like bushes and little germinated weeds. They're actually
Mm,
trees. Finding them, select the ones that you want. There might be some pruning and thinning involved, then protecting them. There's certain threats that stop this plant material from becoming trees in the first place. Often fire, roaming livestock, cultivation, and certainly in much of the third world, cutting for fuel wood and building purposes. If we can influence those threats and reduce or eliminate them, then the trees have a chance to regrow. So at its simplest form, and it's very straightforward, it's a tree regeneration method. Where it gets exciting is it's also a development method and it involves mindset change. At its core, why aren't these trees regrowing themselves? Well, it's human behavior. And if we can influence what people believe about trees and how they treat them, then it changes the whole dynamic, and it's about empowerment and enabling people to benefit from the natural resources at their disposal. And why I think that's exciting is if you convince enough people, enough communities, you can have a landscape level transformation, a nationwide level transformation, and even what my ambition, worldwide level restoration.
yeah, no, amazing. And so it's working with the what's already there, and then helping people's mindsets shift in such a way that they can then manage that and really allow it to flourish.
Yes, yes. Probably 95% of my time is not technical, trees and biology and all. 95% of my time is on mindset change, re-greening that space in between the ears.
Yeah, no, it's so important. So in Niger, FMNR has seen over 6 million hectares of degraded land rehabilitated. What does that look like for families, for communities? What was before and after? I guess what's this new regeneration? I guess.
Definitely. And having that before is very important for understanding the impact today. I arrived in Niger Republic in 1980. The landscape that was before me was at the point of ecological collapse,
Well,
barely able to support life. Even though, and I was 24 years old then, even though in my lifetime, this had been a biodiverse dryland forest with lots of wildlife, with permanent springs, and with fertile farms in the clearings. 2 short decades, it had been brought to its knees, unable to support life. And so, what does that mean practically? Well, women walking for 4 hours every second day to look for firewood. When there's simply none left in the landscape, they would resort to burning straw, cow manure, goat pellets. That was the level of desperation. Water tables dropping, and women having to sleep at night on the edge of the well, waiting for their buckets to fill. Men, when there was a shortage of food, because with the loss of the trees, there are stronger winds, higher temperatures, loss of organic matter. So, drought and loss of soil fertility meant more regular hunger and food insecurity. And so often the men and the young boys were away in neighboring cities, in neighboring countries, looking for work and money to send home. So it's quite a picture of desperation, hunger, poverty, sometimes conflict, and sometimes displacement. Contrast that today. What was the impact of this 6 million hectares of restoration? We still get drought, we still get bad weather events, but having trees in the landscape, people are much more likely to harvest something from their crops and animals because of a better microclimate and more fertile soils with greater capacity to hold water and
Yeah.
slowly release it during drought. The trees themselves become an economic and a food security factor because we can now sell firewood and timber, and we have wild food harvests and fodder and traditional medicines, things we can consume and or sell, and so on and so forth. The water table in many places has recharged. It's hard to know where to stop because the impact has been so significant. And one study, just to finish off, one study, it's estimated that Nigerian farmers grow an additional 500,000 tons of grain every year without irrigation, without fertilizer or improved seed. If you have the money, if you have the resources, good and well, you can do even better. But this is done simply by virtue of the fact that today we now work with nature instead of fighting it and destroying it and then wondering why on earth we're hungry.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the conversation often is about you've got to make a choice between nature and food systems, and that they're not connected. And you're saying that's the complete opposite.
Exactly, exactly. Working with the flow of nature is much more beneficial than trying to force it into our mold and then be surprised at why it's not having an impact. Paul, I almost forgot the other big change. You asked what's the impact, the before and after. You imagine you're an adult, you're a parent, you can't feed your children, put nice clothes on them, even send them to school. You feel like a great big failure in this world. You've failed at the most basic requirement of a parent. And then here comes this simple solution, literally at your feet, that empowers you and enables you to create that future that you want for your children. And so, yes, I love the green, 6 million hectares, tick, wonderful. But actually, the biggest change that I see is this restoration of hope. People reaffirming their dignity and their sense of self worth, their pride, and this great joy at being able to work with nature and the results that that brings people. Honestly, whenever I go back into these communities and I see this joy and this hope, it's very powerful.
Yeah, no, I can tell just from your face the power of that. What's some of the biggest challenges you face when introducing this kind of approach, given how successful it is? When you're coming to a new community, what's some of the biggest challenges?
Definitely. So, you're fighting traditions. There's been a long history of cutting trees and farmers patting themselves on the back because that's what their forefathers told them. That's what a good farmer does. And so I'm fighting against fears and against false beliefs about trees. And the fears might be, oh, these trees will mean reduced yield. There'll be shading of my crops and my pasture. I'm already poor. Tony's trying to make me even poorer. So, how do you counter that? It sometimes takes time. And I think this is often a missing ingredient in our development thinking. We have to build relationships, we have to build trust, we have to listen to what people are fearing and spend that time with them to work through those things. People have false beliefs, so they believe trees take forever to grow. I'm hungry today. How could I wait 15 years to get a benefit from this? It just takes too long. Again, need to build that trust and acknowledge people's fears, but invite them, encourage them to come on this journey of discovery. Would you be willing to experiment with me, not on your whole land? People are risk averse, understandably. Let's try it on a small area of your land and we'll see if that works for you. Fortunately, this thing works really quickly and people start to get benefits even in year one. And by that time, usually I don't need to push very hard. Another factor which I don't think I have the full answer to, but often there are vested interests, there are powerful people who want all of the resources for themselves. And there's no simple answer to that except to keep persevering, to try every avenue, and to try and use logic to show it's a win win for everyone if we restore the environment.
No, absolutely. This land restoration through FMNR, how would you say? So, describe to us a little bit how it contributes to the fight against climate change as well. We've talked about how it helps the community, but how does it help, us address climate change?
One of the things I love about this thing, and it really is so simple. I already described how you do it. But there's no real downside. It's a no regrets technology, and usually it's win 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 all the way down, including for climate change. And so, as anything green, as it grows, let alone trees, it's going to be drawing down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And if I take Niger, for example, when it was 5 million hectares, every hectare's sequestering around 1 ton of CO2 per hectare per year. And multiply that by 20 years, and you've got 100 million tons. Now, that's an extreme case. Low rainfall, poor soil, farmland, so you don't have a dense forest. In Ethiopia, where we did this with better soil, better rain, and forest setting, we were sequestering around 12 tons per hectare. So it can have a very big direct impact on mitigation, but it doesn't stop there. As the trees grow and they're adding diversity, it's helping people to adapt. Maybe my crop fails this year because of severe drought, but I can always harvest some wood or some tree product and eat or sell that product. And at the same time, it's buffering those extremes in climate, lower temperatures, lower wind speeds. Some of these trees are actually drawing moisture up through their taproot and leaking some of that moisture through their shallow roots, effectively drought proofing the nearby crops. So it helps people to adapt to these extreme conditions.
This work is pretty amazing, and you've had some incredible recognition, including winning the Right Livelihood Award. What do some of these accolades mean for scaling this work globally? How have they helped in really bringing attention to this important work?
Certainly. So, first, I want to say I don't do the work for the awards. That's sort of icing on the cake. But the real reward is the joy in people's faces when you see the impact that's having on them. And secondly, the true heroes aren't Tony. The true heroes are the farmers themselves who took a risk with this white guy and went against the norms of their society, experimented with it, and then had the generosity of spirit to share that knowledge with their neighbors. I just wanted to put that on the table. In 1999, when I joined World Vision, there was practically zero awareness of FMNR in World Vision, but even on a global scale. These awards, why I love them, is they legitimize FMNR. They give it a profile that it didn't have previously, and they flung open doors. Oh, Mr. Rinaudo, and I don't look for this. Titles don't mean anything, but Mr. Rinaudo, please come in here. Opened doors. EU, UN, donors, other NGOs, World Vision itself. It's given me an audience and a legitimacy that didn't exist before. And particularly that one that you mentioned, the Right Livelihood Award, since 2018, we're on a whole new level, whole new plane for the adoption and spread of FMNR globally.
I mean, sometimes that recognition, is, even though the work speaks for itself, that recognition really elevates it and enables that conversation and more people to pay attention, which is great. So when you think about the future and you think about future of climate action, of these kind of community-led solutions, what gives you the most hope?
I get to speak to audiences around the world, and often the most common remark that comes back to me is, "This is a story of hope." And I get the general sense people feel pretty down, pretty hopeless about the global situation with climate and politics that's going on. And here's this story of hope. So the biggest encouragement I get is from the Niger story itself. And if I build the context a little bit for you, if you were a strategist and you wanted to have a global impact on climate and environment, I assure you, Niger is the last place you would choose. Edge of the Sahara Desert, extremely harsh climate, one of the poorest countries in the world, and certainly at that time, no government support for this. It had lots of other things occupying its mind at that time. And who did I work with? The most marginalized, the poorest, the most risk-averse people on earth. And yet they're the champions who affected this transformation across 6 million hectares, doubling crop yields, increasing income, security, and so on and so forth. That gives me so much hope. If those people there, under those extreme adverse circumstances, could achieve so much, then we in the West, with our knowledge, our wealth, our technology, we in the West have absolutely no excuse, and there should be no reason for living in this hopelessness where too many people just given up. It's too hard. It's inevitable. No, if those people can have such a victorious impact, then we have no excuse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and it's an amazing story and so important for people to. How do they find out more about FMNR? Where can they go to find out more about the work that you're doing, about where and how this might, I guess, be something that they could engage in and utilize in their situation?
Please go to our website. It's very, very simple. And I guess you can put up a link later.
Yeah, I'll put some links.
Yeah, FMNR Hub.
Okay.
Hub, yeah.
Perfect. And there's resources there. And I think, Tony, you've written a book as well, haven't you?
Yes. So on the Hub side, there's manual in English, French, Spanish, and Burmese. There's free online training. So it's self-led, but it's a series of tutorials and exercises. So also available in those three main languages, and many other resources there. In terms of the book, yes, Paul, thank you. So during lockdowns, I never thought I'd write a book, but I had no excuse during lockdowns, and I wrote a book called The Forest Underground, my autobiography. In addition, following the Right Livelihoods Award, I met Oscar Award-winning filmmaker Volker Schlondorf. And he was so astounded to hear this story. He said, Tony, surely with such impact, you must have followers all around the world. And back then, that wasn't the case. And I said, Volker, it's not so easy. And the guy was 80 years old at that time, but he banged the table and he said, well, we'll have to do something about that. And together for the next months in 2019, for months on end, we were together traveling around various countries. And he made a documentary film called The Forest Maker. So
Oh, wow.
if you can access that, and I think it would be on Amazon and other popular outlets, I highly recommend that. It really gives a visual picture of the changes, but the transformations in people's minds and the impact.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show, Tony. It's a pleasure to have you, and this work is so important, and it's infectious to be able to, talk to you and hear about the stories and the work that you've done.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.